We are here today with James Reid, whose new book I just read recently called Diamond Stained is absolutely fantastic, by the way. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment now that you have a brand new series out.
Thank you. Yes, I am. Well, I'm a fantasy author. I've been doing it for like 5 years now, but I'm finally starting to get my books published, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Uh, I almost have all of Secret of the Jewels out. The last book will be coming out in early July, and
Aha.
in the moment, I'm working on my second series set in the same world, called What Mask Hide, and it starts out a bit more of a sort of thieving caper sort of story. I
Aha.
get to have my main character, this noble woman, sort of learn how to be a thief and a spy and all sorts of fun stuff. It's been a really fun to be working on this new series.
Yeah. Ooh. Ooh, that sounds fun. Okay. So
Yes.
taking place in the same world, though.
Yes, at the same time actually.
Oh.
They're concurrent series. Yeah, they actually they even have a bit of a crossover.
Aha.
In the third book, the character from my new series, who is connected to the past of Owen.
Mm-hmm.
It's his old girlfriend.
Uh-huh.
So she shows up in his third book to sort of give him
Oh.
closure on
Oh
their
no.
relationship. Yeah, but so and then I get to write that scene from the other side on her, and you get to see why she's like actually there, and like what
Ah.
she's been up to, and it should sort of recontextualize some of like her, because it's also a very pivotal moment for her, because it's also giving her closure on the relationship. So
Okay.
it's yeah,
Because, yeah, having read book one, I don't like her. But I feel like if you've got a whole series,
right?
then she can't be terrible. Well, unless she's the
Yeah,
villain.
no, you get well. I mean, so she's when you pick her up in book one, this is of course 2 years after she and Oben broke up,
Right.
and she's starting to come to realize that just what her own fault was in it, and how sort of dissatisfied she
Yeah. Yeah.
if she messes up. And so this is her story, this is her redemption now, so this
Cool.
is her trying to become that person. And I said, like, I had a reader, so like I've had one author friend read the rough draft, and she really loved it, and she
Yeah.
was because she was like, I hate this woman, and then you made me like her.
Ah, I love characters like that. I hate you, but I like you. I hate you, but I like you. Yep, those are the best.
Yeah,
Fun.
so
Okay, and I know you already have a different series out. I don't remember what that one's called, so you'll have to remind me.
it's called The Storm Below.
Storm Below. Yes, I knew it had to do with storms, but I wanted to put a boat in there. Yeah.
Yeah, there are
So,
boats in it, yes.
oh, okay, there are boats.
Yeah, they're
Hooray.
flying boats, like Age of Discovery sort of sailing ships just flying through the sky.
Awesome. Also, not so awesome because flying terrifies me, but awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of flying over an endless storm that no one ever comes back from if they fall into it. So it is perilous, especially when
Ooh,
you're doing battles over it and ships are getting destroyed. It's
ooh,
perilous stuff. Yeah.
fun. Okay, so those two worlds are completely different, but both very interesting.
Yes, they're radically different worlds.
Yes, well, you've got your gems and jewel theme with the Secret of the Jewels, and then a giant storm with the others.
Yes.
Want to
And
know where they came from.
well, the giant storm, so there was a war in the distant past, and it was between two goddesses, the sun
Ah,
goddess and her sister, the storm goddess. And the forces of the sun goddess, they won the war, but in the last moment, sort of the king, sort of the tyrant king as he's called, as he's like in his dark and all the winning armies who have come and liberated the world and have driven him back to his final stronghold. As a final act of spite, he called
hmm.
upon the storm goddess and covered the entire world in a storm so the sun could never shine on anyone. And then the
Whoops.
sun goddess, she took pity on her followers, and so she lifted up all these floating islands into the sky as sort of a last miracle. And so they all live above the storm and on these floating islands. And this is 2,000 years later.
Okay.
And it's how the world has evolved from that point. And the there are these sort of demons that come out of the storm called the Storm Riders, and they throw themselves at the floating islands in hurricane-like storms
Uh-huh.
called cyclones. And so they're very deadly. So not only do you get hit with like a hurricane, but there's also guys running around in there with like weapons that'll mess you
Oops.
up. And, yeah.
Oops.
Yep.
Perhaps not the best way to spend a Tuesday.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got one series out, you've got another one almost out coming July, and then a third one.
Yes.
How fast do you write?
I can write 2,500 words an hour.
An hour? Wow. Okay, my fingers
Yeah.
don't work that fast.
It's not the cleanest copy, I'll admit. I have to do a lot of cleanup on it, but yeah, I don't know. The ideas are just, especially when the ideas are flowing, I want to get it down. Then
Yeah.
I can clean it up in the editing and
Yeah.
rewrite process.
Ah, the editing process. Always
Oh,
entertaining.
so much fun.
Yeah. Well, for the writing process, from ideas all the way to, well, theoretically money in the bank because we're trying to live off of the writing world. What's the least favorite bit?
As much as I like the world building, I have a hard time just sitting down and doing it because I get distracted so easy because I'm trying to think about things and then my mind goes in weird directions.
I
Then I
know
gotta
that
I
feeling.
gotta put all these nebulous ideas on paper so that I have notes so I can reference back when I'm writing it so I can try to keep things coherent. And I really
Yeah.
just want to get to the writing it and I'm impatient and if I don't want to rush it because I need to get all this stuff done because I'm developing a new fantasy world right now and so
Oh
I've been doing it
no.
for the last couple months and it's just I just want to get to the writing it and I'm almost there.
Oh yeah. Putting all of the notes together is hard, especially when it's mostly fragments of ideas.
Right, right. I mean, like people who write like romances or thrillers or something, they have so little world building they have to do.
Well, yeah. And to be fair, urban fantasy also does something similar.
Yeah, yeah. I have written an urban fantasy novel that's sitting on my hard drive that
Ha.
was a lot less world building. Although I did have to do some. I had to read a lot on Norse mythology and it was more research actually to just sort of get into the mythology a bit more.
Yeah, well, there's research and then there's inventing. Although
Yeah.
sometimes the laws of physics do actually still apply.
I try to use the laws of physics and then just see how the magic can break them, and in a sort of consistent way. I try
Yeah.
to keep it grounded in like physics things should work normally unless there's some sort of magical reason that it doesn't.
I like that. Gosh,
Yeah.
I wish I could do that. That would be very exciting.
I'm not saying I do it right. I hope I'm getting stuff right. But, there's a
Well,
lot
it's
of
it's your book, so if you get it wrong, I'm not sure we'll notice.
true, true. Although I've had some beta readers that ask me very important questions that make me go, yeah, you're right.
Oh,
I gotta fix that.
yeah, I've seen a few of those sometimes. Or, oh no,
Yeah,
all important detail. Whoops.
yeah.
Okay, so with a urban fantasy on your hard drive and several other books in the making, I mean, sounds like you explore around a lot with different fantasy stories, different ideas. I imagine that's rather fun.
Oh, it is. It's Someone asked me if I've ever had writer's block, and the answer is no, because I'm always working on different things. So I'm always got something I'm tinkering with. So I
Yeah,
think it keeps something from being too stale, I guess, you know?
yeah.
Like I'm not just working on one thing. And so I sometimes when I'm working on something else, I'll solve a problem for a different
Mhm.
series. I think when you're really stuck on a problem, you need to disengage your brain to let your subconscious really do its job and sort of provide you those answers you need that your
Yeah.
more like logical conscious brain is stuck upon.
Well, disengaging the brain is always the hardest part.
Yeah, so if you can do something that does that, like you know, driving or something, or working on a different story,
Hmm.
is definitely disengaging your brain from one problem.
Right. So then how many stories do you work on at a time?
Well, I make my money ghostwriting, so I always am working on other stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, that works.
Yeah. So I don't know, usually working on I'm working on like two fantasy. So I'm writing one fantasy novel, and I'm world building another fantasy series,
Hmm.
and then I'm doing like my ghostwriting stuff. So I got a couple projects I'm working on right now
Yes, and free
for various
time
clients.
is a thing?
Um, so there's some free time. There's like 15 minutes I let myself have to read a book every day at
Oh.
least, and there's like an hour in the evening when I'm just ready to just lie down and go to bed, or I relax for an hour or two.
The people who say writers don't do anything, I laugh really hard.
Yeah, well, if all you had to do was hit publish on the book and money flowed in, it would be a different matter. But
Oh, that would
that
be
is
lovely.
not that's not the case. You gotta work for it.
Yeah, and there's that weird thing called marketing, which we have to do.
Oh, it's the worst. That's the worst part of writing. It's the marketing.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree on that. All right, so you have also, if I'm understanding correctly, started doing podcasty type stuff for the fantasy sci-fi focus group. I
Yes.
imagine that's rather a different sort of experience than world building or writing novels.
Yes, it's very different. It's been relaxing, I guess. I don't know. It's not as stressful as trying to market. It's a different thing in the day, to sit down and talk with someone. You're in front of I'm working by myself all day,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's like I don't get to see people, especially these days.
Yeah, these
So
days people are kind of hard to come by.
yeah, like my roommate, he is still working,
Aha.
so I never saw him even before the quarantine, and I'm still not really seeing him,
Yeah.
because he works a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's nice. I've got two episodes. One episode's published, another episode will be published soon, and so I'm trying to get two interviews in a week and just
Very
talk to some
cool.
authors, and hopefully, it'll be great for the listeners.
Yeah. Well, I have discovered that the editing part is the hard part.
Oh yeah,
The the talking bit is always easy because you people make it so interesting and so easy. I mean, for goodness sakes, you just wrote a book series about colors and color schemas.
yes. Then we get real, and yeah, that's it's very fun to work through all sorts of sort of philosophical discussions via my magic system and
Ah,
how
yes.
and
Your
its sort
magic
of
system
philosophy
is
of
great.
thank you. I came up with that for a short story,
Hmm.
um, and like it was supposed to be just for the short story. I never planned to take it any further, but I just wanted. It was this is actually the second magic system I ever came up with because this is the first short story ever actually written all the way through and completed.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I just thought of this idea. What if there were these jewels, and what if they each had represented a different aspect of their religion and how that kind of would work with how each jewel functioned, and then I just wrote the short story, and people are like, this magic system is amazing, you should do something with it, and they were right. So I just started writing more short stories set in the world,
Hmm.
and then I just sort of built this world, and I thought this was a really good world that would be ripe for having different sort of stories set in different places around the world,
Right.
and they all are united by this magic system. And while it might function a little differently here and there, and their philosophy on how the various colors mean does change from location to location to some
Hmm.
extent, but there's definitely like I have rules like what they mean and why like one culture sees it this way and why another culture sees it differently, but in fact they're kind of seeing the same thing. They just understand it a little differently, and so it's been
Yeah.
a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand why your world building is such a intense process.
Yeah, yeah.
Because let's see here,
It's fun.
you've encountered several different cultures already in book one, and I imagine there's probably more complexities to be created and done in the other books, which I haven't read yet, but I will do soon.
Yes, there are. Well, it's all kind of. I think we kind of get the most. I think it's all pretty laid out here with sort of how them. I think we'll get into one more use on how to use the gems. That's a little different. We haven't seen it in the first book.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get into more about the the underpinning metaphysics behind it all, how they work.
Metaphysics! Yes!
Yeah, there's going to be some out of body experiences and uh, yeah, like I have good plans for Ravina. She's going to be very important to sort of um, uncovering exactly how all this, like what is going on, and um,
Awesome.
yeah,
I do have one question though.
sure.
Are there enough jewels to go around? Because at least here, not so much.
This this world has a way higher concentration of jewels, so
Okay,
they're very common in
good
this
to
world.
know.
That's how they can have them everywhere. Yes, I mean the Palace of Lights where the king lives, that place is just covered in diamonds, um,
Ah,
just
wow,
an obscene amount of diamonds. You
wow.
know, he's very much flaunting his wealth. But yeah, they're very much more common. That's why you know they're not you don't see them as jewelry too often because
Right.
they're much more valuable as machinery. And I just knew that like they needed to be common. I mean, not super common, but like every most countries can get them.
Right.
There's major mines, you know, the mines in like the border fangs, the mountains that are between two of the countries are. You're going to hear a lot about them as we get into sort of um, the Brotherhood's plots
Hmm.
going into the later books and how they're trying to, you know, use the political unrest that we've started to see in the first book to usher in their goals.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Very fun. So I'm going to move a little bit sideways because I can.
Sure.
Um, have you, or I guess for the other books out there that I'm going to focus on specifically that level of world building that you'd like to achieve, is there an author whose abilities in that area you'd like to steal?
Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, but that doesn't surprise me.
He not some of his other books, but like his Stormlight Archive, just the world of Roshar that he created is very, very creative and an alien world compared to anything you find on Earth.
Hmm.
Such to the point where it's really clear in the early books that humans did not come from this planet, and as a minor spoiler, but that's actually revealed in the book that humans didn't originate on this planet.
Yeah.
And if you know his works, that you know that there's all these planets and humans are all over his
Hmm.
universe, and it's a very intriguing world he's created. But Roshar specifically, but Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman's Deathgate cycle really showed me like the crazy stuff you could do with a fantasy world
Hmm.
back in the 90s. They have so they created this world building where they had like it was our planet, magic gets rediscovered, and there's a war. And one of the two wizard sides decided the best way to win the war is to just destroy the world and recreate it as four elemental worlds,
Ah,
and then imprison their enemies in a labyrinth. And this is their solution to winning the war,
I
and they
mean,
did
that's
it.
one
And
solution.
so you have like the world of air, which is all like floating. It's very much kind of where the storm below comes from. It's floating islands, and there's a storm at the bottom, but no one really falls into it. There's kind of
Sure.
like three levels. There's like the dwarves live on the lowest level, and
Hmm.
they'll kind of work on this crazy machinery that's supposed to be operating everything, and humans and elves live on the kind of the middle level, and they're kind of always at war with each other on like
Hmm.
they're flying. Like the humans fly around on dragons, which they tame with magic. And the
Yay.
elves build flying ships because their magic is more technology, whereas humans is
Sure.
more affects nature, which is a very interesting
That is a very,
reversal on the
yeah, you
theme.
don't
But
normally
yeah,
see that. Ooh.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things they did, where humans are the nature magic and the elves are the technological magic. And then they
Awesome.
had like the world of fire, which is an inverse sphere with like four molten suns at the middle, and then
Oh.
huge plants growing on the inside. And
Oh.
it's always day because because the suns are in the middle and you're
Right.
on the, yeah, so it's always day. And they live on top of these huge trees, and no one, like, the ground is a myth to them because no one goes down deep enough to
Oh
find the
wow.
ground. Yeah. And
That's
sadly, the world of Earth was kind of boring. It was just like underground caves and magma. But then the world of water was like these like little moons that produced their own atmosphere that sort of just floated through this eternal sea following the sun that kind of kept it like liquid while the outside was all ice. It was really
huh.
an interesting thing. Yeah. So it was
Gosh,
just
I
kind of
think
just creative, and it
fascinating.
just, yeah, it just kind of showed like you didn't have to do, because at that time it was all medieval European fantasy, because this was
Yeah,
early
that's the
90s.
standard at the time.
Yeah, so it was just really intriguing to read something so different, and it just
Yeah,
made me think I want to try to do some different things, with my fantasy.
right. And these days, I mean, the niche genres within fantasy are super impressive.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, no, but not back in the 90s.
Okay. Huh, yeah. Gosh, it's been a while since I've read fantasy books from back then. I'm so up
Oh
on
yeah, I
the indie stuff. I'm better at knowing the indie stuff than I am the big name publishers these days also. So that's a thing.
yeah, I think I've managed to read like one new big published book series in the last 5 years that wasn't like an author I was following before I started writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just so many books out there, and
Yeah.
it's really hard to go back to the traditional world after becoming immersed in the indie world.
Yeah, yeah. There's some good stuff in the indie world.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask a little bit about ghostwriting because I haven't gotten a chance to interview all that many people who do ghostwriting. What's that like?
They send you an outline, and you know what they want, and then you agree on a price, and then you write it. It's kind of like writing anything else. You're not creating the story. You're just doing the story that the person paying you wants.
Sure,
So
sure.
you can do it, and depending on the customer, it really depends on how much your input you get to put into it.
Hmm.
But ultimately, they're paying, and so I just really just want to deliver them something they'll be happy with,
Right.
and you know,
I'm more curious about the editing process.
um, well, I just write it.
Oh, okay.
I
Huh.
mean, I might do, depending on it, I might do rewrites, but like final editing is up to them.
How
You know.
interesting. That seems so foreign to me to hand over the editing process.
Well, like I said, it's their story ultimately, and
True.
they're the ones who are going to have it's work for hire, so I'm not the one who will own the rights to it.
Right.
So,
Huh.
um, you know, and so they're
Um,
free to do whatever they want with it.
sure. No, it makes perfect sense. It's just very interesting.
Yeah.
Something completely different from writing and publishing your own book where you have to worry about the marketing, which is
Yeah, I see that I just get paid a flat rate, and it's up to them to make money off of it, or to
yeah,
do whatever they want with it.
yeah.
It's
Oh, as far as marketing goes, I'm sure there are maybe some tricks you've learned to pass on to the rest of us.
I am a complete and abysmal failure at marketing. That is what I've learned. I
Darn.
have yet
I keep
I
hoping
have yet to
someone will have
find
like,
something that works.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
There's got to be some magic formula that we don't know. But oops.
I've
God,
definitely heard people who have made it talk about it, and their magic formula doesn't seem to work for me. So
darn.
yeah,
Curses. I was hoping for a little extra nudge there.
yeah. I'm sorry. I wish I could. I wish I had something. Uh,
Ah, well, that's all right. We'll go and move in a different direction. For writers trying to get into um, large scale epic fantasy, not taking place in the urban fantasy genre? Are there traps to avoid?
I mean, there are definitely some very well tread ground in
Hmm.
epic fantasy. You know, the hidden prince trope and the chosen one. You got to be kind of careful when you're messing around with those because they've been done so many times. Um, in fact, I kind of played with that when in Above the Storm, where my main character is a farmer
Uh-huh.
and his last name is that of a king, and there's a character who goes like, "Oh, that's the name of the last king of where you're from." He's like, "Yeah, but so do like I have this last name, and so do all my cousins and half my
Right.
village."
Right.
It's I am descended from a king, but so is a lot of people after a couple hundred years.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, yeah, so I just had a little fun with that. That was my own private joke, but I had to put it in my writing.
Yeah, that's great.
Um, you gotta be careful. Um, on like your villains, you gotta, if they're not like elemental forces, make them kind of people and have goals, and they can't be the villain in their own mind is kind
Right.
of important. It's easy to write the mustache twirler, evil overlord, but he needs to have a reason for what he's doing more than he just wants to take over the world or destroy it for no reason. Unless it's like if it's an elemental force, like it's the personification of evil. Yeah, maybe that thing just wants to destroy the world for the heck of it. But if it has like a human general, that
Hmm.
guy needs to have a motivation.
Right.
Um, like prophecies. Be careful with those. Uh, you know,
Prophecies are always fun to mess with.
I kind of recommend not putting elves and dwarves in it.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Just because they've
yeah,
been
I
done so
mean,
often?
I think so. I think they're I like to put or just make them your own. Don't make them just standard dwarves and elves. Like I do, like my elves in Above the Storm are my bird people, and
Oh,
so
fun.
yeah, you wouldn't. They're very. I like to think of them as my elves, and I like to think of the lizard people as more my dwarves.
Hmm.
Um, but like you won't. They're not. But they're not quite the same. I just
Yes.
playing around with it. Try to do something different with them.
Hmm. Subverting
Um,
the tropes is always entertaining.
It is. But know the tropes. Sometimes it's
Yes.
okay to use the tropes. Like the tropes are there. That's what the readers of epic fantasy want. It's just make sure you're just not being boring or being something someone's read 1,000 times.
Yeah. Although I do have to admit, very occasionally I will read a story that's one I've read 1,000 times and it's still entertaining.
That's true. That's true. I used to reread my favorite stuff all the time when I had more time. It's just it's like you can write anything if you do it right. So that's the real interesting thing. There's no like you can don't do all this stuff, but if someone comes along and does all those things you tell them not to do and they do it in just the right way,
Hmm.
it'll work. That's really
Yeah,
the
but
hard
there's
part about giving advice. So you
there's a
need to know
trick
it
for that.
well. Yeah.
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 Because, I mean, you've got that fine line between too much and not enough, and then there's the added, okay, how well do you actually write versus the characters and the plot, and it's, oh,
So
sigh.
it's a lot of pit traps. But if, I think just be passionate. Don't don't write epic fantasy because you think it's going to make you money. Write epic fantasy because you want to, because um, it's it's a lot of work to produce an epic fantasy series.
Yes.
More so than probably any other genre, except for maybe some really sci-fi, really hard science fiction, maybe, where you have to really know
Well, that's
your
basically epic
stuff.
fantasy with science instead of magic, though.
Yeah, except for there, your readers will nitpick you if you don't get your physics right. Or at least in epic fantasy, they'll just be going with it.
That's true. That is true. I had forgot about the whole, accuracy of science thing that we have to worry about.
Yeah, you just in epic fantasy you need to more worry about like no Deus Ex Machina stuff and
Ah,
having a
that
magic
one's
system that's
always fun to
consistent.
play with.
Yeah, just don't have don't have your a convenient solution just pop out of just nowhere. set up your convenient solution so it doesn't seem to pop out of nowhere.
hmm It can still be a convenient solution. You just have to
It
play
just
with
has
it.
to it just have to be something. It can't just be just abrupt and sudden and not make any sense. That's all. Your story just
Right.
has to make sense. That's the most important thing about a story. It
Yeah.
has to be internal. It has to have internal logic that is coherent with the world, even if it's not coherent with our world.
Right. And I love playing with the internal logic, and you do it particularly well, I think, with your characters, because everything from their perspective makes sense, even if it doesn't actually make sense.
Oh, good. I'm glad that is the case. You sometimes you don't know because you're writing it and you're like, it makes sense to me. Well, it makes sense to the reader. It's a real trap because you know way more than the reader does.
Right.
It's hard to know how they'll take it.
Yeah. Knowing more than the reader does is always a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've accidentally set up stories where it's like, oh, this is the solution, and I forgot the evidence.
Well, I mean, I used to be a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons, and
Uh-huh.
I would like literally set up a situation, then my players would come up with something, and I'd be like, "Where did you get this from? How? What is going on here? I don't understand your reasoning. What did?" So you
That's
never can really know how people are going to take things. Yeah.
yeah, that's fun though.
Oh, it was fun because then you gotta roll with it as a dungeon master.
Right.
So you gotta write a new story because your players have chosen option, C. You gave them two, and they went with the third one.
Mhm. Mhm. It's always the third one that trips you up.
Oh yeah.
All right, so working on one series at the moment, how far are you into that?
Um, at the time of recording this, I have two books written in rough draft, and I started the third book 2 days ago. So I'm
Very
like
cool.
I just started chapter 4 today.
Aha. And I kind of want to ask what's next, but you're still working on the world, so I don't know if I should push for spoilers.
Um, so okay, so there is yeah, it's hard. I have an idea for a character that you've met in Diamond Stained,
hmm
and this character will have their own series that takes
Ah,
place in the aftermath of this series. I'm not sure how long it'll be, maybe just a trilogy.
sure.
And I have ideas for two follow-up series that directly to this one that kind of because I will say this, Secret of the Jewels has a storyline
hmm
and that storyline ends, but there are plot threads for something bigger out there. So while this story is centered very much on the city of Cash and
hmm
its immediate repercussions to what they're trying to stop are really just felt there. Um, there are implications, though. They'll learn that there's more going on in this world, and that might have to require these characters to go onto a more broader stuff.
Ooh.
I have a short story. You might. There's a place called the Democ Empire that's probably been mentioned a few times in Diamond
hmm
Stained,
hmm
and they have. I have written a short story that takes place in there, but they are doing some really creepy stuff with their jewel machine research, where they're making like zombies out of people as like sort of robotic soldiers. So they're
Oh,
like
helpful.
yeah, so they're like removing people's brains and replacing them with sort of like obsidian minds, and then
Oops.
just sort of controlling them. And so I had the short story that it's uh, called Mutilated. That's one of the characters. He was like one step from being all the way modified.
hmm
Now he's kind of like trying to rescue like the slave children that they take up there to do their experiments on.
hmm
And so that's what his story will be.
Ooh, very interesting.
Yeah.
So only, like one or two ideas.
Then there's another place. So there's the Forbidden Kingdoms. That's kind of a nice place, and they have an actual still breach that's left over from the Shattering, where there are demons still
hmm
coming through, and so they are trying to hold back the breach. And I have a series of short stories called The Soldier's Wife that's kind of about there. And then there's on the other side of the world, there's kind of like these sort of very tribalistic people living in the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
and they summon demons, like these demons. They know how to They know how to use jewels in a very unique way that's not at all known on the other side of the world. And
Oh,
they are at war with the necromancers people. He's actually from the other side of the world.
right.
This
Oh,
this is never going to get explained in in Secret of the Jewels, but he actually is was from the other side of the world, and he had a mishap and got sort of teleported across the world and
whoops.
popped out on the other side, and it was actually seeing him pop out that kind of got the White Lady back doing things.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
that will be covered. Yeah, so there's a short story I have called The Demon Sphere that's kind of set place from the perspective of a demon summoned from another world and thrown into this battle with a bunch of undead that the necromancer from this book is one of the guys sending these undead at them. And yeah, so they had a little mishap in their story, and she popped back to her world and he got sent to the other side of this world.
Fun.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, I'll have you stop before you give away too much because this is all very interesting, and I'm sure I could probably poke for a lot more, but spoilers.
Yes.
All right, well, it has been super fun talking with you. Your world building is fascinating and
Thank
very
you.
interesting. Is there anything else you'd like to add, writing related or otherwise?
Just that you can find me on Facebook. My author page is JMD Reid. I have a reader group called Fantastic Worlds of the Imagination,
Hmm.
and I'm on Twitter at JMD Reid.
Very cool. All right, well, have a fantastic day. All right, well, go cause trouble.
Yeah, you too.